How did you first come across magic?
I think it really came through my interest in just things that were different, things that weren't in the norm. It kind of led me to that. Like when I was a kid, it was like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, which was just like, weird history, weird archaeology. And that kind of, you pull that thread, next thing you know, 20 years later, you're involved in ritual magic. That's kind of how it happened, and like it's that journey really kind of took me like all over kind of Asia, really all over India and Nepal and parts of Turkey, and you do kind of like the external exploration and you do the internal exploration. And I kind of did both at different times. Yeah. Not maximizing the benefit of doing them in sync. But that was really it. It was just curiosity. And I think when I was a kid, really at a young age, I was drawn to the weird. I was drawn to the other. Like in as a kid, that manifested in like Dungeons and Dragons.
Right, okay.
White Dwarf and all that kind of stuff in 2000 AD. Because I wanted that. I wanted that world. I didn't like the world I was in. I was just unimpressed by it. I was bored by it. I wanted a world with superheroes. I wanted a world with magic.
What's that mean, Marcos? I don't want real life. I want magic.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think my interest in some of the kind of the archaeological stuff has come from that need and hope that the world has more magic in it. And that wanting to see.
So when you were getting into, say, stuff like the fantasy kind of stuff, say like Dungeons and Dragons, or were you kind of hoping it was really real, or were you aware it was fantasy, or were you just kind of going, well, this is just, it's not it, but it's closer to Mass on a Sunday or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. It's. Do you know what? I think the story for me is this: I don't know if you remember like the packs you get with Dungeons and Dragons. You had the amazing painting on the cover of like a dragon and like a band,
a dungeon.
Yeah, dragon and a dungeon. You know what you're getting. You know what you're getting with Dungeons and Dragons. But like there was this like amazing, beautiful painting, magnificent, that fantasy art, and then you get into the book and it's kind of like, okay, roll 5. Turn left, you score 6 hit points. You're like, Hey, I was kind of wanting to open the box and be teleported to that world.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, but like you get into it and you play and you become immersed in it. But I took a lot of that aesthetic, like all those kind of beautiful pieces of art from White Dwarf. I'd like covered a corner of my room in them, and I had a little desk which I covered.
What sort of age are you at this point?
About 8.
Okay, yeah.
Right, and I covered a desk in like a black cloak my mum had made for me.
Right. Awesome.
And somehow, I don't know where these came from, but there was this little brass candelabras. And I had these things on my desk. So most kids were like playing around with different, crap. I had basically what looked like a black altar in the corner of my childhood room. And like,
nice.
My dad was like, let's just take this down.
Yeah, can we just down? Just dial this back slightly. Yeah. Were your parents proper Catholics, or what was?
Yeah. I mean, in a mix, but there was like there's kind of like Catholic for external viewing.
Yes. Most of Ireland.
Well, yeah. We'd kind of mutter our prayers and do that thumb thing.
Yeah.
Which I still don't really know.
Go
what
to
it is.
funerals to be seen.
Very important. Very important. It's a great funeral. Great turnout.
Yeah.
And but
great feed after.
But my mum always was interested in kind of the Eastern religions. Like I when I was at home during the summer, like I found a copy of like John Keel, but the Trojan, what's it called?
Oh, right.
The Trojan Horse one. Do you have? I can remember the exact one from 1972. It was my mum's.
Right,
so like that stuff. I grew up with all that stuff there. So I was always kind of flicking through UFO books when I was very young and looking at that stuff and absorbing that kind of stuff. And on Phil Hine and I did a talk or a show about Telof Sangrampa.
Right.
Because I had a stack of those books, and from my mum as well. So she had a kind of a huge influence in kind of just broadening my view of the world and its possibilities way beyond kind of like Catholic Ireland and the kind of rigid parameters of thought that were kind of there in the 80s in Ireland.
But was your mum into it as a kind of a novelty, but secretly, prayed to Jesus, or was it like was she also looking for something else?
Mum was quite into into transcendental meditation.
Okay.
Like
that cult.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, very much into that. But everyone kind of hedges their bets. It's like there's always there was no magical practice going on. It was like Buddhism.
Right. Yeah.
Like looking at Buddhism and interest in UFOs and kind of a bit of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. So it was kind of very, very vanilla Forteana and Esoterica, that kind of stuff.
And so your dad was telling you to dial it back. Was he more kind of straight in the sense?
Yeah, straight, but ironically actually has gifts.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So that, and he'd be, I'm sure if he listens, he'd be cringing as I say this, but he's been seeing things like all his life. Like apparitions, orbs, all that kind of stuff.
Is he scared by them? Because I think my experience is people who don't like it don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And I suppose the people who talk about it doesn't happen to them. There's kind of this catch-22 to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he doesn't like it. No, he said it could be very frightening.
I can imagine.
Yeah, but he's his seventh child of a seventh child.
Ah, well, it's his own fault. So. So like, were friends into the similar things? Like one of the reasons why I never really got into Dungeons and Dragons is because I had no friends who were really into it. So I was only left with the Ian Livingstone, Steve Jackson books, which are played by yourself.
They're pretty good. They're pretty good.
House of Horror and all of them are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So had you, kindred spirits at that time, or
no. I did not. I did not have any friends who shared those interests, and I haven't really for most of my life, to be honest.
Oh,
just, and that's not being disparaging on my friends. I've got some great friends, some crap ones too. But it's it was one of those things. I kind of read Terence McKenna in the early noughties, and that his whole thing of like find the others. I think that's really important. I think it's massively important because you are kind of like, you end up being kind of like, it's very easy to be the only weirdo in a small town, who's interested in this stuff, and that could be hugely isolating. And that's why I think stuff like today, like the whole kind of like Instagram, TikTok, witch culture. I think it's brilliant. I know a lot of older kind of people in the occult are kind of like, oh Christ, and there's always that bit of like, generational differences, but I think it's fantastic. I would have loved to have had some way of accessing knowledge and peers in that way back then, 20 years ago. It would have been really cool.
Or even, maybe a book would have been nice as well, like anything. Like
that's true. Yeah. And I suppose, thinking about it is like how much this stuff was frowned upon, like in Ireland. Like Aleister Crowley in the 90s in Ireland was pretty much just seen as a devil worshipper. Like that was the definition.
He's probably still seen as the devil worshipper. I don't think that really.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I remember Tower Records had the Satanic Bible and they had Magic Book 4 Part 1 or whatever. That was kind of, you could see the tide was turning, but I'm sure there was people outside with plaques giving out, placards.
It's funny you mentioned Tower Records, like that. Do you remember on Wicklow Street in Dublin?
Yeah.
And then it was like the back wall is where all the cool books were.
Yeah, exactly.
Like all the Tashkin
t-shirts.
Yeah. All the Tashkin photo books, all that cool stuff back down there. Yeah. Oh, bringing me right back.
Yeah, it was like the pilgrimage. You go to Tower Records, then you go down to Sub City, and then that was it. That was by Wicklow to Exchequer Street.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So we left you at 8-year-old. How did you get? Like, did you progress into studying it properly as you got into secondary school, or did it disappear for a while, or what's sort of happened?
Well, it manifested in a different way. So in my early teens, I really started to kind of just read everything I could find. So I read all the kind of like I said, all the Telops and Rampa, all the stuff on kind of all the UFO stuff I could find, like Messengers of the Gods, all that kind of stuff.
A lot of Colin Wilson, I suppose, Mammoth books and that sort of stuff. Is it that were at the time?
Yeah, that kind of stuff, but most of them really, most of them were kind of like 70s paperbacks. So my mum used to work in Easton's, so she used to get all the books when they came out. So I had a stack of those, and I kind of worked my way through all those. I started using the Pendulum when I was about 14, 15. Okay. I still use it today, and that was when you kind of looking back on things, without really having any kind of framework for it and kind of understanding it, looking back and kind of realizing, actually reading Gordon White, listening to Gordon White talk about, like conjure to get things bend your way, but, use divination to find your way, find the best route forward. And I was like, I've been doing this since I was 15.
Right.
So you look back and you kind of realize that's what you were doing. And like, to a very good level, to the point where it's like, well, the frequency of accuracy is way beyond
chance.
Fluke. Yeah, way beyond chance, So
was the pendulum the moment you kind of, like, I suppose, became invincible, to use Gordon's term, like, was that the moment when you started that was more than chance, or was there an actual thing you can point at? Or?
Yeah, well, there was a couple of really, like in terms of me understanding, there was there was other, and there was more. There was like the divination stuff's, it's cool, it's helpful, it's nice, but it's very, it's very surface level. I had a couple of experiences like in deep meditation that were life changing, and one of those was I basically kind of semi left my body and I could feel it. And I was doing a meditation that was in one of these books that was designed to help you leave your body.
Right, okay.
It worked, and it scared the living shit out of me.
Right.
Like, it absolutely worked, and that.
Okay, can you describe what it was? Like,
it was like, so it was the usual kind of stuff you'd expect. The kind of the prana, the breathing. Get your breathing cycle, build up your kind of energy, and then you focused on visualizing your pineal gland absolutely being like a ball of fire. So it was kind of like the middle pillar, and then the end of the middle pillar was focus on the pineal gland and visualizing pushing it through your forehead and going up, and your whole kind of energy body going with it. Right. And I did it, and it worked, and it scared the living shit out of me.
When it worked, were you like, could you see your body? Was it like a near-death experience?
No, it was like being pulled out of your body. It was like being pulled out of your body, and I could feel my consciousness being about a foot above my body, and like really kind of, if you can imagine it, kind of energetically someone pulling your jumper, right? But all over your, that kind of feeling coming out. And I got about a foot out of my body, and
like, no thanks.
Properly was like, that kind of like that scratch record noise. So I'm like, nope.
I want that.
yeah, and that was it. It was kind of like it worked, and and I immediately was like, okay, I bit off more than I could chew, and was like back in. I was like properly sweating, really, what the hell just happened,
Try it again next week.
Well, I never actually got the same success. I never actually got the same success after that. And another one was, again, a kind of a deep meditation. And I just had this real kind of immersive vision of like flying through space, and kind of, coming up to meeting this kind of weird crystalline structure that was some sort of consciousness. And around it was like it was floating in the air, but around it kind of, it's about a third up, was like a disc, and on that disc just had loads of kind of these weird kind of almost like what's the main figure in Watchmen called, the blue man?
Dr. Manhattan.
Dr. Manhattan. It had all these kind of like Dr. Manhattans meditation
not just
all around it.
A series of Manhattan.
But just kind of just those figures that like just were balls, kind of like slightly monkish looking things meditating around it, and that was really super immersive. I don't know what it was.
That's interesting, because when you think of stuff that like Alex Gray does, is the DMT kind of head stuff. That's kind of a similar look-ish, I suppose, when you see them all together. Was it kind of that DMT feel to it? Well, I've never done DMT. I can only go by, I suppose, Joe Rogan does it. But like, say, the Alex Gray paint, did it have that dimensionality to it? That's what
it didn't have the kind of, like, you look at an Alex Gray painting, you see the absolute vivid color, the living color, and that kind of, that again, quoting terms, we got those kind of that self-replicating machine elves, that kind of like living intelligence and communicating through symbols. It didn't have that kind of full-on intensity. It was very dreamlike, but I was awake. Yeah, and it did have three-dimensionality, but not the kind of level that you would expect, where you're watching some sort of Technicolor dreamscape. As people given their accounts of psychedelic experiences. Yeah.
So that you're kind of at that point, you're going, right, invincible, this is a thing. So once you've decided it's a thing, what do you do about it?
Well, I didn't do very much about it, really, to be honest. Clubbing happened.
Women, drink, drugs.
Yeah, all the kind of standard pursuits of the late teens, and kind of most of the 20s took over. I still kept my hand in. I was still kind of reading, like, I was still kind of reading about like Fortiana, but also kind of stuff like the Holographic Universe. That was a great book of Michael Talbot. Like, that was always kind of on my bookshelf, was always leaning that way. But it wasn't till I think my late 30s that I want to talk about my late 20s, when I kind of started to come back into that space. And I think kind of when you start to kind of settle down, and kind of all the madness of the 20s of kind of, what am I doing? How am I doing it? This isn't what I planned, and all that kind of stuff. When you kind of get over those bumps in the road a little bit, and you get a bit more headspace.
Well, I suppose it's a classic sort of Saturn return type thing. The point that,
Yeah, exactly.
So many people say that, and it's even things like, people say, when I started back reading comics when I was like 27, 28, 29, or, stuff that they kind of did years and years ago. Before life got in the way.
It's funny you say that. I mean, because like, comics have been a part of my life all my life, right? Yeah. So I've always loved comics, and they've always been there, and certainly a lot of the esoteric ideas that become part of my life, and stuff that I've followed and explored, have come from comics, and so most of it, all kind of like how I got into a magical life, was from books and comics, like 100%. Like down. And I remember kind of, I remember being so delighted with myself reading Swamp Thing, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, and seeing in one of the panels that in the background somebody was reading Carlos Castaneda.
Right.
I said, I knew what that reference. I knew it. So it's that kind of stuff. Like, you go back and you read it like 15 years later, and you're like, whoa, there was so much stuff being platted into this, and even more so with the Invisibles, which I think is, it's now getting the kind of love and respect it deserves from the esoteric community, because it is an absolute seminal piece, the Invisibles.
I think the problem with Invisibles is that it's so stolen from, that if to approach it, like, say, if you give it to someone now, it's hard to kind of explain the impact, or like, well, I mean, it's fine, right? Right, it's a bit like the Matrix. Yeah, but I mean, this is before the Matrix, which is, and that's obviously an easy kind of example to say, but so much other stuff, like, it's so much, like, kind of, even down to things like Stranger Things as an entire episode, that's pretty much the Invisible. Yeah. Like,
well, they have it in Stranger. I think it's in Stranger Things, where they got like
the house,
Keith Mogg and Barbara on the wall, and one of them. Again, that's one of those ones where, like, I'm do the kind of the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, pointing at the screen. Everyone else in the room going like, well, what are you talking about? Like, I have the wrong friends.
Do you think your 20s would have been different than had you had the right friends? If, like, say you had, discovered, telemic circle somewhere locally, you know, that wasn't insane, or there's some sort of Wiccan group even, or that.
I think so. I think it probably would have. You know, I certainly kind of would. I think would have learned a lot more at an early stage, because I spent years floundering and really not knowing where to go. I mean, because I think one of the worst things that can happen to you is you get the wrong book. Right. You get the wrong book and you go, this is impenetrable. You know, and it's like you picking up Crowley without having some kind of mentor or some group to kind of go, read it again, think about it again, you know,
or a book about the book.
Yeah,
you know, that kind of, it's like trying to read Steiner and you go, just go away from me. There's no chance.
Totally. It's just like, you know, like, what's wrong with you?
I know,
what do you mean? You know, like, and it's like, without that kind of support group, I think that's quite a damaging thing. You know, this is why I think things like, again, the ability to access information and, you know, teachers through you know, creator teachers who are making stuff and putting it out there is really great. It's really important. You know, I mean, like, people talk about, oh, well, you know, the quality is variable. The quality is variable in everything. It always has been.
Sure, yeah.
You know, so that's just par for the course. But I also think, looking back on it, is like, you know, you got so much to learn in your 20s. You know, like, people often say, like, oh, would you like to be 20 again? I said, if I was able to take my, like, consciousness as it stands now, my kind of like who I am now, and be in a 20-year-old body, yes.
Would you know? Because everyone around you is just 20.
Well, you know, if we talk about the health aspect of it, right?
Yeah, okay.
You know, having that kind of like vitality and be able to move the way you used to be able to move, all that kind of stuff, you know.
Not throwing your back out, getting up off the couch, or sleeping.
Yeah, totally. You know, how do you get into a deep med? I just stand up too fast. And I'm, you know, and I'm in a different consciousness state. You know, so it's like, so that would, that's interesting. But to be 20 again, no, I'd hate to be 20 again.
Yeah.
I'd hate to be 20 again and go through all of that again, all the learning, all the kind of absolute screw ups, and, you know, and the kind of those periods of revelation where you're like, oh, I can't believe all these people have been such dicks to me, and then you kind of find like, what's the common denominator? What's the common theme and thread? What's wrong with all these people? And, you know, and you start, totally, and then you start to do all that kind of shadow work and kind of understand how you've contributed to most of these challenging positions you've found yourself in.
I always play, not always, I often play a kind of a mind game, I suppose, with myself, or a mind thought, where I go back and go like, would it be possible to talk to 20-year-old me and give him actual advice? And the answer is, of course not, because there's no way. Even if it was, 43-year-old me come back and he knew that, he'd still go, no, you're wrong, though. You know, there's just no question of it. Like,
yeah, this is it, and it's like, when you think about it, you're such a different person from then. I mean, like you know, in terms of like the way our cells like regrow, you're a physically different person. Yeah. Like you're like there's nothing about you that's the same. It's total difference. But even looking back at, like, you know, at 25 to 35. Like what I had done in terms of the places I'd gone to and photographed and traveled to, I don't think I would have had the courage to do that at 25.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Like, you know, for me now, if you were like you're going to India next week for 6 months, like, I wouldn't be gripped with any kind of fear about that.
Right.
I would be annoyed about the inconvenience.
Yeah.
Right, and you know, that would be it really. Like, any kind of nervousness about the challenges of traveling or anything like that just wouldn't be there, because I've done so much.
I suppose with the challenges of, am I able for this as a being? You know, how am I going to react? Yeah, it's like the first time you fly, you go, well, I don't know, am I going to be nervous? I've never done this before, so I have no idea who I am in regards to a person flying. Yeah. 20-year-olds don't have that, I suppose, for so much stuff, and can't have, because it's experiential.
That's that. It's experiential, and that's the big thing. You know, that's the trade-off for youth. You know, and I'd rather have experience than youth, to be honest. Yeah,
just a bit of vitality would be nice when we get the the blood of the injections from the what was that adrenochrome. That's the word. Yeah, just give me the adrenochrome, please.
It's very hard to come by, apparently. Yeah. But it's that thing of like, like if you don't kind of get more kind of resolutions to who you are and kind of start to pull apart that puzzle and understand yourself for all your flaws, for all your great bits, and become comfortable with them. If you're not there, then you want to go back to 20. Because you don't have a different state. But when you get that place where you're kind of like, I do that, it's kind of stupid, but you know what, I'm okay with it. Yeah. Because in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, And I think that's the big thing. The big thing for me more than anything else is kind of going, I don't think it matters really in the grand scheme of things. And that's really how I got properly immersed, with I want my life to be magical. Because at that point, there was still a lot of nervousness for me around kind of magical circles and kind of being with magical groups, because I didn't know anything about it. Which is, as I've kind of already said, none of my friends were involved. I was the weirdo in the group, so I didn't have any peers at all in any of the groups I was in, and like, I used to joke I was a plainclothes goth, so like, but that tells you a lot though.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't comfortable enough to take the full step, but like, again, my peer group was different. Like, it was weird. I used to play like a lot of Gaelic football, a lot of rugby, you know what I mean? And like, you grew up in Ireland, it'd be like, what would a goth kid look like? Well,
it would look exactly like a Father Ted sketch. That's exactly what it would look like.
Yeah. So
or the IT crowd or whatever.
Totally. So it was just kind of like, I wasn't comfortable with myself. And then as I got kind of into my late 30s, and I'd done all this kind of mad stuff, photographing, and I think that was basically, I condensed 20 years of not living that exciting exploration. I condensed that into a period of 6 years, which took me all across North India, Nepal, Turkey, Morocco, all
just
across.
Before we get to that bit, I just want to go back to a thing where we were just talking about that, that unless you basically look at the darkness or the shadow of yourself, you would be back, you would want to go back to your 20s and stuff like that. So, like, do you think people who have an interest in the type of things that we seem to have an interest in are more introspective and more willing to look at that compared to other people? Or do you think, is it... because the reason why I'm asking that is because I definitely spent not way too much time, probably not enough time, but way more time than other people looking at my assholicness, and to the point where it kind of feels like I'm the only broken one in the room at all times. But but it's, then you kind of look around and go, well, seriously, lads, these are all broken as well. You just don't give a shit. Yeah. And so, like, do you think it comes with the parcel of, the package that arrives from Hogwarts is you're a wizard, but like there's a lot of work with that,
Yeah, I think it comes with the territory. I really do. It's there's a bunch of different things that come with the territory, right? You go and talk to a bunch of musicians, there'll be one there. Like, everybody I know who's deep into kind of Forteana magic or the occult just broadly, they all have some kind of big creative streak. Right. They all have had their problems with mental health, depression, anxiety, all that kind of stuff, because it just goes with the territory. It's that sensitivity that, because creativity is a special thing, right? You're weird. Yeah, it's weird. It is. It's weird stuff, right? Yeah. What is that compulsion to do, to create, to make an image, to make a shape, to make a sound, to make an experience? That compulsion, it doesn't make sense really. No. But it's in there. It's in there at that magical space. For me, it definitely is. And that's the thing I'm talking about, is like, you look at those people with those traits, right? And it has the dark side to it, right? Yeah. It's the knife that cuts both ways. And having those traits can put you in a position of isolation.
Sure.
Not always, not always at all, but I think people can be prone to it, and this is where actually finding the others again is so important. But that introspective bit, it ultimately brings you to a place of truly looking at yourself. That we should do, but it certainly was for me. It ultimately brings you there.
I know some of the Facebook magic groups would tend to suggest that maybe doesn't do it universally.
Yeah.
So would it be a thing then maybe that rather than magic comes with the darkness thing? Is it that creativity is the thing that sometimes also brings magic, but sometimes also brings music, sometimes also brings photography, or some sort of, or is it just the acknowledgement of, to go very woo, I suppose, the idea of that we're trying to bring something from eternity into time, that it's the manifesting, this creativity is kind of not quite a microcosm of the macrocosm, because depending on what you want to look at it, but it's some sort of recapitulation of creation itself or something. I often think of that like.
I think it's exactly that, to be honest.
Right. Okay.
From my point of view, and I think this is where that you look at kind of magic as ultimately as a conscious or subconscious way of trying to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Why do I need to explore this stuff? Why am I bringing it back? Alex Gray is a visionary. He brings it back and he paints it.
Yeah.
And that's it. People who have these callings, they're bringing stuff back, and that's how I see it anyway. But with that, it kind of reminds me of like when you talk about the hard bits that come with it, right? The challenging bits that come with it. It's like, if people talk about kind of working with angels, working with angel energy, and it's like, it can fry you.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. If you're working with super creative energy and that pipe is open, it's going to cause burnout, or it's going to cause whatever. It's because you're detached from kind of the every kind of plotting reality that's around you, because you're living in a world where like, actually I'm going to spend 2 weeks working 24 hours a day.
Where time doesn't matter.
Time doesn't matter. And you're just in this space, and you're almost kind of like channeling something, or you're like overshadowed by a creative force that's insisting you download this thing.
Yeah, the channeling thing, I've a hard time explaining it to people, because it's exactly channeling, but it's also not new age channeling thing.
Yeah.
It's not that. But
no Palladians involved.
No, it's not. But it's like, it definitely is a channel in the sense of, or more, I think you're a conduit is probably a better word for something.
I think that's probably a better word. Yeah.
That Elizabeth Gilbert TED talk was an eye opener for me, and I know it's quite kind of, I suppose a bit. I was going to say a bit trite, but it's not. It's just because Elizabeth Gilbert was in it, was played by Julia Roberts in the movie, and it's kind of has made it.
Oh, was that like Eat, Pray, Love or something?
That one, yeah. Okay. She's a great TED talk if you've never seen it, though.
No,
and it's about creativity, and I'll we can all look at it in our own time, but it's about the idea of it arriving, this thing arriving, and you just having to be kind of present with it and stuff. And it talks about Maya Angelou, that she used to get poetry and it used to arrive, and sometimes it would arrive backwards and she'd have to transcribe it and stuff like that. And it's like, that's definitely channeling, but it's also, as I said, it's not the Palladians, it's not Bashar or Abraham Hicks or something.
Yeah.
But it's mostly, I think, and let me know if it's the same for you or if it's similar, is just allowing it to be. Like you are literally there, the person who can physically do that. And the more you try to mold it or create it or shape it into something, the shitter it becomes. And sometimes it goes off to someone else and goes, no, you're the wrong man for me.
Yeah, 100%, and it's like, you get the stuff people talk about, the state of flow, right? Where things it comes easy. They describe the kind of state of flow as finding that kind of idea of being centered. And I think really, if you kind of unpack that a bit and think about the idea of being centered, for me, when you're in a creative state, that place of being centered is where I'm not interjecting in the process.
Yeah.
I'm letting it come, and and then I'm just doing my thing. Whatever that thing is, that thing might be pointing a camera at something. Or writing something down. But it's like, thinking about it, like, because people ask me about some of the stuff that I photographed, and they go like, what were you feeling, or were you freaked out by it, and like, I have it when I answer that question, I have a bit of a weird answer, and the weird answer is that I didn't feel anything. And it's, sometimes that gets interpreted as being like,
I don't care. Whatever.
You're dead inside. Like, I'm like, no, it's just I wasn't thinking about it. Like, I wasn't, even if like I've been in leper colonies, or I've been in kind of like a gory rituals, and like photographing all these really, sometimes frightening places, or places where transgressive things are happening, or things where generally people wouldn't be very comfortable.
Yeah.
But I don't really experience that discomfort at all. All I think about is, how do I get the most brilliant image from this? How do I tell the story?
Do you feel it in hindsight, looking at the images ever? Like, do you go, "Oh, I really should have been scared there," or "I should have been elated"?
Really? Right. Not sometimes not really at all. Yeah. If anything, when I look at some of the images, I get annoyed if they're technically not good. I'm like,
sure, of course.
I should have had that at a faster shutter speed.
Yeah.
That's what
too
I think.
Soft.
Yeah, that's it. And it's that's the kind of thing I get. But then, kind of looking back about, sometimes I take it on board. I go, oh, crikey, that was me photographing that dude drinking whiskey out of a skull.
Have you found that sometimes the bits that are your best bits, say art-wise, are the bits that, not that you don't remember doing, but we definitely weren't conscious of at the time. Like, when you come back looking through a roll of photo, you go, geez, I can't even remember that photo or that thing. But sometimes, as if, again, coming to that kind of conjure thing of it, to kind of go, you just have to switch off for a second here, because you're going to ruin this by being you.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been times where I've not been able to shoot as well as I have been before, and I don't know why. Okay. Where it's been off. Where I'm like, I can't get it. I just can't get a good image. What's going on? Or an image that I'm like, yes, that's good, and I know that immediately. Yeah. There's a thing in photography. It's called chimping. It's basically take a photograph. You're looking at your camera. You're chimping, right? And
it's great crack. Everyone should do it.
Yeah,
and everyone will do it.
Everyone does do it. Yeah. But like, I can take a couple. I always take a couple of test shots, check my exposures, and then play with it a bit and kind of get where I want. Take a couple of shots, look down, and I know when I've got that bingo moment where I'm like, I got something good, right? And you have that sometimes, right? You kind of go, we're good, and then sometimes you're like, I just can't get it. I can't get an interesting image. It's just a pedestrian image, Or
do you ever have that experience where you go, I know there's a photo here, but I can't see it? Or there's something here, but it's my whatever it is. It's not your talent, it's not your aesthetics, it's not your ability. It's just, I'm not seeing the thing, and you can take 100 kind of snapshots if you want to, or whatever, and it's you go, no, there's something there, and I just missed it or something. That them type of things lead me to that kind of idea, and it turns out it's not a true story, but it explains the idea well, is that nylon was invented in both New York and London at exactly the same time, hence nylon. Turns out that's not true. But that idea of ideas, as Alan Moore says, ideas have people rather than people say ideas. I think it's Alan Moore, and I know Gordon mentions it a lot, but I think it originally comes from Alan Moore, and that whole idea of idea space and stuff like that sometimes it can be a bad fit for what it's trying to manifest. Yeah,
and it'll go somewhere else. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I had kind of I hope we mentioned Terence McKenna for a third time, but I was reading a book called The Archaic Revival.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about some of the concepts in it, but I had this idea of, like, what if there's like, we got a biosphere, we got an atmosphere. So what if there's like a knowledge sphere, like a noosphere?
Right.
And I spelt it in my head as in no, K-N, etc.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Then about 2 days later, I'm flicking through this book, and the actual nososphere comes up in the book, and I was just like, and again, it was a total sync. you know, and it was a tap on the shoulder. We're going, yeah, things real. There is a noosphere, you know, and that's where all this stuff comes from. And I think more talked about it again in Promethea, that idea of where ideas come from, and
I suppose it's similar to Rupert Sheldrake's kind of the morphic resonance, this kind of field that has, you know, that the more you do something, the easier it is to manifest habits, all of that kind of stuff. But I suppose the morphic resonance idea kind of doesn't pinpoint creativity in the way that say the idea space or the no space or whatever it is does, and that seems to be new stuff, whereas the morphic resonance seems to be more about redoing the stuff that's there or something. But I'm sure that's just my poor understanding of it, really, but I'm sure he does cover it. So we've talked a good bit about photography. So the last time we talked, you were about 29, 30. Is that when you get into photography? Were you doing photography at that point?
I did photography in uni, so
right. So it's been forever, kind of.
So I did a comms degree, and like it was kind of photography, and photography was kind of my major. I did my thesis in photography.
Right. So actual dark rooms, film, green light or red light bulbs, all that.
The whole lot. Yeah. Getting films on coils.
Right. Do you miss it? Do you miss that? I know some people really do.
Not really. I mean, like, there's an immediacy with digital that is great. You know, I mean, it's also
there's no chimping in the old days. You know.
Yeah, totally. I think, like, you know, one of the great things about like digital as opposed to film is that you know, you got as many frames as you want, right? And B, if you screw it up, you can tell immediately.
Yeah.
I'm gonna waiting like a week later.
Oh, I have a great shot. Oh, I don't have a great shot.
No, you don't. No, you don't, my friend. Like, so it's there's a great immediacy in that'll kind of, you know, the technology is phenomenal in that way. But it's also meant that kind of photography's kind of gone back to what it was like, you know, 120 years ago. It's like a Victorian gentleman's pursuit, because you know, why would you spend that level of money when effectively you can take just as good an image on phone? Like, you can. That's just the way it is. And but what it brought to me was kind of a connection to my family as well. So my grandfather my mum was a photographer, my uncle's a photographer, my granddad was state photographer in World War II in Ireland.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and my great granddad's was he was a phenomenal photographer, and like a whole heap of his stuff is in the National Archive in Ireland, the T.H. Mason collection. So it was that kind of thing where I was kind of just picking up a baton,
right?
You know, like
consciously. Like, you know.
Well, I mean, it was just kind of that thing. Or like, I picked up a camera and I was just good,
right? You
know, so it was kind of that thing. Where I picked up a camera and I could make good images,
right?
You know, and like that was just there. It was just kind of came with the packaging, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's an interesting one. And then, like, you know, I did my thesis and I dedicated to my grandfather, you know, who had passed on, and turned out my granddad had trained my lecturer.
No way.
He got a thesis, and he's like Barry Mason from Scary. Like, yeah. He's like, said your granddad trained me.
Wow.
It's like, there you go.
That was definitely meant to be. No question.
Yeah. Well, typical Ireland as well, right?
Well, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like that whole joke of, do you know where are you from? Oh, I'm from Dundalk. Do you know John Murphy? Fuck it, I do. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, a bit more cosmopolitan than that, actually. Well, is his brother Colin? Yeah, I do know him. Yeah.
Yeah. 4.5 million of us. Like, was it not even half of London?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, from there, it was kind of, you know, I did a bit of that, and I kind of went into doing a lot of like digital work. Moved around a bit. Moved to London, and then I just had my head down for like 10 years, really, just doing
like office job. What
office jobs, you know, working in kind of digital advertising agencies, and like I kind of got into digital through photography, because, you know, Photoshop and design and all that kind of stuff. And
sure, yeah.
And then had done a lot of that, was really just nothing's happening here. I'm not in a place I want to be. I've tried everything I'm supposed to do. I'm still not happy. I've not let that creative pilot light burn, and as a result, I'm kind of in a nowhere land. And I'm still listening to like all these podcasts about Fortiana. Like, I mean, this is crikey, like 2007.
Right.
Like Mysterious Universe was going then.
Was it? Is it gone now? Is it like, I thought it was like an institution at this point?
Still there. Yeah. It's still there. But it was like that's they've been around for a long time, and all that kind of stuff, and just going, I've done nothing.
Right. Yeah.
I've done nothing, and a lot of time I feel like that. That kind of stuff, the beaten path for the beaten man, and so I kind of left everything and went to Southeast Asia, and I went Thai boxing for like 2 months. When lost a lot of weight.
When you did that, around that period, was there like, because this seems to be the story, did it come with like the end of a relationship? Did it come with the job getting fired? Did it
very accurate, Tommy? Very accurate.
Yeah.
It came with the end of a relationship, and which was a big relationship, and with that. With that kind of change and kind of what you were expecting not working out, it is a huge catalyst for you to reset, right? You're kind of going, right, so I need to look at kind of what was it in me that wasn't working, but also it kind of means that there was a future laid out for you that doesn't exist anymore. And you also have that kind of total freedom to go, well, I can do what I want now.
Yeah. What do I want?
Totally. But you're in that kind of position then, because you're in like the early 30s, late 20s, where you're like, well, I've been working for 10 years. I actually have some resources.
Yeah.
So instead of putting those resources into a house, I decided to go off to Southeast Asia, do some Muay Thai kickboxing for couple of months, which basically was a daily beating.
So you got beat up every day for a couple of months.
Crap kicked out of me for about 2 months, and lampooned for being a fat, pasty Irishman. Trying to skip.
Had you done anything before that? Like to give you just I'm going to get beaten up. This is what I want to do.
I've done martial arts for years.
Right. So it's not that weird of going halfway around the country or around the world to get beaten up.
Not at all. Like, I mean, the hardest thing the hardest thing for me was, the fitness. It's like I'd much rather be punched in the face than be made run.
You know what? Yeah. I know what you mean. I really do.
It's like, it'll hurt a bit, but like 25 minutes running in a park. Jesus.
Yeah, just hit me.
I'll take a clip to the jaw. But that was really good, and it's like the discipline with martial arts, the getting up, you'd been uncomfortable, getting used to being uncomfortable, and like the conditioning and all that kind of stuff. And
is there a meditation aspect to Muay Thai or any of that kind of stuff?
No, there wasn't this. I know, like there wasn't the kind of thing of like focus your prana, focus your chi, and all that kind of stuff. Like Muay Thai. I mean, I'm not that experienced, and I trained in Thailand. I've trained here as well. Like I've got about maybe a year's training in it. Okay. But it's when I spoke to my instructor in Thailand, who was an American guy who'd resettled there, and he was talking about, look, what this is about is it's not about how much damage you can give; it's equally about how much damage you can take, right? And that really resonated with me. Because life's hard, right? Life can really knock you back, and kind of, I just come out of a period of change, a period of kind of life being tipped on its head, and that really stayed with me for a long time. It's like, how much damage can you take? And I think it's an important lesson to learn, that resilience. That kind of like, that's not going to go in. I'm going to let that bounce off me, and that comes with age a bit more as well, where you start to do things like, how much damage can you take? That starts to tie with, I don't really care what that person thinks about me.
Yeah. Because it can, the kind of, I suppose, the bad side of it is how much damage can I take is then becoming a victim. That's the kind of darkness side of it. That's that's how it plays out badly or pathologically or whatever. But
if you think about it in the right way, and it's important to think about it right, exactly, otherwise you end up in the place you just described, is that actually what it starts to give me a bulletproof vest, and it starts to give me the tools to go to the life I want, and that means shedding people who are in your life who don't want to know the person that you want to be. Then that's what happens. Comfortable with that, you're fine. You go, okay, that's fine.
That definitely seems to be a thing that people do in their 30s, or at least people I've talked to, is you shed the skin of your previous life, essentially. Like, particularly friends that you have that you only have because you have them 15 years and you don't even like them. You know what I mean? They're no good for you at all. But it's it's John. It's fucking John. You have to just put up with him. And you go,
He's like, hold on. What do you do?
I don't have to put up with him at all. Bye, John.
Yeah, totally. And that was a really important thing. Like, so it's that, understanding of, like, you can have the only person really stopping you from being what you want to be is you, and like, because you start to understand that, like, you caring about what other people think is really on you, like, and it's the 20s is full of that. Your 20s is full of that. You're kind of like, you find a mean within your peer group. You all kind of broadly like the same music.
Yeah. Or pretend to, at least.
Yeah, or pretend to, and like, you all kind of broadly wear kind of similar clothes. That kind of stuff. You start to kind of replicate each other. But at the time, I was the only one reading books on UFOs.
I suppose the question, maybe you weren't, if it was like, if you were kind of hiding it, maybe, there was.
No, I was definitely was.
Definitely was. No one else reading books at all.
Yeah, I'm still really good friends with all these guys. They're like, have you got your wand and your top hat out? It's not that kind of magic. Where's rabbit? I'm like, it's not that kind of magic.
You like it, not a lot, but you like it.
Yeah. And so it's. I think that was it. It's that being able to kind of understand and interpret when things go sideways in your life, and actually understand that these things are catalysts for change, and they're opportunities for change, and they're growing experiences. And a lot of the times it goes back to what you're talking about, being, would you rather be now or would you rather be 20? Well, actually having the insight that I have now, and understanding that all those challenges that some of them I really suffered in, suffered, and kind of, some of them where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, that were that bad, that kind of stuff. Looking back now, you're able to see these were catalysts for change, and they're that kind of, that alchemical thing of, like, burning out the crap, burning out the impurities.
It's the shit, your shit, which you turn into gold.
And it was only really then, like, in my early 40s, that I kind of, I done all this photographic work, and I wanted to photograph, occult groups doing ritual magic. I did a couple of lectures on my photographic work in Threadwells in London. I got to know a few people, and over the years, I joined a magical order. Nothing really happened with that.
Was it a cult?
Very much so. It has been famously described as a cult by a mutual acquaintance. Friend, I have to say, very good friend. So a couple of years ago, then I kind of decided to take the plunge. I wanted to kind of really explore this avenue. I'd been that kind of bookish occultist, kind of really absorbing stuff, really reading it, and getting kind of under the skin of stuff. And I'd done all this traveling. I'd done all that kind of photographing of like transgressive stuff, and I'm very much what could be described as magical stuff, and stuff retrospectively, looking back. If I'd kind of known now what I know, if I'd known then what I know now, I may have not have done some of it because some of it was a bit risky.
Okay, yeah.
It was like, particularly stuff around the gin. I would have kind of been fairly well versed in gin lore now. I'd be like, I'm not sure I want to kick that particular hornet's nest. But, I kind of like stumbled my way through that back in 2016. But after I came back from that, and I kind of got more exposed to some of the occult community.
Was it a deliberate attempt when you came back to?
Yeah.
Or was it just that the internet was now.
Well, it was that I wanted to talk about my work, right? I wanted to have the opportunity to do that, and kind of the primary people who were interested in my photography were occultists, people who were experienced in that area. So it was just kind of a natural meeting of minds. So
was there any trepidation about coming out as publicly as a kind of a wizard or whatever?
Yeah. Like a proper card carrying weirdo.
I suppose not that you put up the standard Facebook thing of you with a wand or some fucking stupid Tumblr thing, but there still is a point where you go, right, I'm just not hiding this anymore.
There is kind of like that kind of a cult stepping out into the open, right? And it's kind of scary in a way as well, because you are kind of, in a way, putting a target on your back to a degree, because
particularly with people you actually know. That's how it seems.
Yeah.
Well, as Gordon might have pointed out a million times, people don't give a shit.
But they don't,
for the most part.
Yeah. Exactly. People got their own lives to worry about fundamentally, But I think the main thing you're opening yourself up to is the conversations of people ask you to justify it to them. It's prove to me magic works.
Or want to shout at you.
Yeah.
My God doesn't exist. And that.
Yeah. All this kind of stuff. And it's and this is where I say, where you got your bulletproof vest. It's I don't care whether you believe this or not. It's not my job to convince you of anything. Yeah. I don't care what you think. It's good for you. It's I don't believe in you. Good for you. So what?
Yeah.
I don't care.
Ask me next Thursday. I might agree with you. I'd change my mind by Friday, though.
You like football. I don't like football. Tell me why I should like football. I don't care. Nobody cares. And it's and that's the bit where you get that bulletproof vest of just going, I don't really care what you think. I enjoy this. It gives me a lot, So that's I'm gonna do that. I
think we're both lucky in that sense that even though there was that kind of moment where you had to go, right, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
We didn't have a very strict kind of, say, family that would excommunicate you, where some people do, or there's a chance you're going to get fired from your job, or you're Satanist, you get out of my bakery or whatever it is, That's why it kind of, I suppose, it helps being an artist, because you can kind of fob it off a bit as he's just an artist,
Well, this is it, and
creatives are weird,
Yeah, exactly. You got you got the weird creativity, and I have a huge interest in folklore, so kind of someone says something to me and kind of as a passing comment, and they'll start getting the history of why ladybirds are called ladybirds, and it's got to do with this, and it's from 14th century France, and there was an infestation of aphids, and the ladybirds came along, and people called them ladybirds as because they prayed to the Virgin Mary, and they're like, Jesus Christ, okay, we get it.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's
wow.
There are Our Lady's birds who came and
really?
got rid of the aphids. Yeah.
See, that's the when you go to a wedding and you're sit beside someone who tells you useless stuff. I would like to be sitting beside you at a wedding. I mean, I think you'd be a good table guest at a wedding.
It's funny you should say that. I was at a wedding actually back in Ireland about 2 or 3 years ago, and I was talking about Talima to some poor sod.
He's going, all right, yeah.
Okay, Babylon, okay, right. Which is hilarious when I think about it there. But yeah, that kind of it just ultimately got me to the point where I'm like, no, I want to understand this. I want to take the plunge, and I kind of took my Minerval and joined the OTO, and that didn't really go anywhere. Okay. And that's really all I'm going to say about that for now.
The thing I've heard about the OTO is it's more of a social group. You're not really going to learn anything from it, or that kind of.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It certainly was my experience, But what it did do in a roundabout way, again, kind of getting to know people, I ended up getting, again in a kind of a roundabout way, introduced to some people and who have become good friends, who have really, been a big kind of font of knowledge and kind of shepherding me into kind of more of the occult world and that kind of space. That's been great. You know,
so here's I suppose the big question, and I'll not just. The question is, what exactly is magic? But I'll expand on it a bit. In what's going on? What's your worldview? What's your cosmology? What do you think is what's going on, man?
Well, I mean, so I should probably talk about kind of what transfixes me, what has my attention, right, all the time, right? So magic is kind of a peripheral thing for me. I will, but I know from my own interest that I will never be, you know, the Archmagus. That's not going to happen because I don't have.
Well, not with that attitude.
Well, this is true. This is true. Yeah. Self-defining. Because I don't have the kind of like pilot light for it. I'm not like, okay, you know, I gotta absolutely kind of.
Is it because you think it's unachievable, or you're just not interested in the work, or you just don't think that's your path?
It's not that I don't think it's my path. I think like fundamentally, kind of like, you know, the whole kind of like Tree of Life, Sephiroth map makes a lot of sense. You're right. Okay. It makes a lot of sense, but it's like to really kind of get your head around it, right? To really get your head around it, like it is a commitment.
Sure, yeah.
It's a massive commitment, you know, and it's like it's very hard to maintain with other aspects of life that are just there, right? But it's so I know it's going to be slower for me, and that's what I mean by that. Right. That I know I'm not going to kind of get to this, you know, pinnacle of, you know, my higher guardian angel is not going to be my holy guardian angel, rather, kind of like it's going to be a while before we meet. But like
you're on hold. Give me a chance.
Just going to take
running late.
yeah, it's going to take me a while to get there. But I think the thing for me is it's the curiosity of what is going on. What is it? What's happening? And for me, it's the stuff that really kind of taps into that drives me, that I can't stop thinking about, that I can't stop reading about, that I can't stop making videos and podcasts about, is this idea of the other consciousness that we're in some sort of relationship with, whatever that is, you know. And I've always had a kind of like I said, I was reading about UFOs and alien abductions when I was like 14, 15, right? Yeah. And I cut to 20 years later, and I'm in Delhi photographing sites of people who were talking about jinn and jinn exorcisms and kind of learning about jinn, and then kind of that rabbit hole and how it led me back to Ireland, and kind of seeing all these correlations and analogues with jinn and fairies, and that are like almost identical behavior.
Right.
You know, you'd read a story about a jinn involved with a family in Lahore in Pakistan, and it might as well be from Clare.
Right.
You know, it's like it's almost identical stuff. You know, so that kind of stuff was really full on, because then you're kind of going, well, your interpretation, understanding of reality is just, it's so narrow. Like, and it's just missing such a breadth of like folkloric accounts, you know, and we're talking about like the tens of thousands of accounts that people have come back with their experiences. In Ireland alone, like the National Folklore Collection is full of stuff.
Yeah. And people do, I suppose, dismiss it all, it's anecdotal and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we still, like, we diagnose pain anecdotally. You know, we only know we dream anecdotally. You know, so it's not something that we outright dismiss as a thing. It's just something that. And my point, what I suppose, all of that is that whether or not it turns out to be jinn, or whether it turns out to be UFO, something's fucking happening.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? People are seeing something.
Totally, and
you know, that should be looked at.
Yeah, and like the term I think that makes the most sense is ultra terrestrials.
Yeah,
you know, because we they're outside of time. You know, and whatever that means, it's huge, it's vast. You know, and we're dealing with something that has, you know, the ability to read us and actually use symbolism to communicate with us. You know, it's a frightening thing. It leaves people forever changed. You know, to the point where like they come away with gifts, they come away with illnesses. It's like this is a completely transformative thing. You know, but it's the accounts are the same. It's like the missing time, fairies, jinn, aliens, all the same.
Yeah.
You know? Like it's really, really weird stuff. So that stuff for me is just like absolutely fascinating. You know,
would you consider yourself convinced at that on that well, whatever you call it, that's a thing. That's definitely.
I'm convinced there's a thing.
Right.
I have no idea what it is. You know, and it's like, but I'm not sure human beings have the ability to know what it is.
Right.
I think it's outside our capability to understand and pin down, and that's why it's this amorphic thing that changes shape depending on what culture you're in, depending on what time you're in, and it's always a bit off. You know, it's like in some of my shows, I'll be talking about the Dark Man, the Far Dove Dorka, right?
Yeah.
It's this kind of like devil trickster figure that appears on the roadside in Ireland, right? The dead of night. Well, I don't know why they always do that.
This is the most scary, obviously.
Let's pick the time that's most traumatic.
Yeah.
But it's always like it's always dressed in a way that's slightly archaic. It's always a couple of decades out. It's always like there's always something demonstrably off
Well, it's
with
the
it.
same as the Man in Black. It's the same.
Exactly.
They're slightly wrong. Yeah,
Something slightly
wrong
wrong.
car, wrong clothes, that kind of
It's
stuff.
in the 70s, but yet they're dressed like it's the 50s,
Yeah.
and it's always that thing. So there's a slight kind of like misunderstanding of us as well, you know, or they're so outside of time that like 50s, 70s, what's the difference?
Or that they can't see a difference.
Yeah.
That's shirt and tie, grand.
Yeah,
Wrong shirt and tie.
yeah, totally. So in to that end, I am convinced that there's something else. I just don't know what it is. But you know, exploring it and learning about it has been really, really interesting and incredible, really. You know, and there's just such a rabbit hole. It's such a rabbit hole. Like
and it's like kind of, I suppose, sorting out the bits. Like you kind of, you know, you have to go into different rabbit holes and go, oh yeah, no, that's not it. That's really not it, you know. And then you come back, but the kind of the quest, I suppose, is that never goes away. That's the thing, and it's I don't know how familiar you are with Alan Chapman stuff. If you're not, you should, because he's good. But he talks about this idea of the silent knowing. There's a thing in you. It's longing for something. It's looking for something. And you probably, you know, most of us came aware of it either in early childhood or teenage years, and that's what we're looking for, you know. And
it's really funny you say that, because I'm absolutely convinced that when people ask themselves, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? It's like, what did you want to be when you were 8?
Yeah.
Because that's what you want to be. It's still the same thing, you know. And it's like you just unpack it a bit. The things I was interested and drawn to when I'm 8, I still am.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like
what did you want to be before you were told you can't be it?
A vampire.
You can be it. You can be this. What would you call yourself? A plainclothes goth? Is that what you call it? What was it?
Yeah, plainclothes goth.
Yeah. It could happen, man.
Someday.
Do you have a practical magic daily practice? Or?
Yeah. I am kind of middle pillar. It's a banishing ritual. Morning and evening, and then kind of I also kind of I have a salt bath once a week.
Okay.
So kind of I've been doing that for a couple of months now, or bit 2 months now, because this is one of the things when you start to explore this territory, stuff happens, you know. I think when we were chatting earlier, I told you I've lost 2 phones and a laptop.
Oh, yeah.
In the space of 10 days.
Well, that's par for the course that you get off handy.
Yeah.
It's an easy week.
Yeah. But when I went to photograph the gin in India the week before, I went, my camera broke.
Of course.
And it broke in such a catastrophic way that the engineers at Nikon couldn't fix it. They were like, we just need to rip out the body, but and again, like of its own volition, like wasn't dropped, nothing. and the email with the receipt for it, gone.
Of course, it's so like, I mean, and the worst thing about things like this, because I mean, I absolutely recognize that, absolutely, I understand it, is that most people don't and just go, yeah, you're just kind of, and go, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
But what I've been lucky about is that it's happened around other people that they're going, all right, you weren't just lying about that. No, I fucking wasn't just lying about that.
Yeah, I told you. Yeah. It is a thing. It definitely is a thing, and certainly when I've been kind of interviewing people that are really in that territory, something always happens, with the call. We get booted from the call, I mean, it can happen.
Do you think it's a malicious thing? Do you think it's just the energy thing? What's your thoughts on why it happens?
It's the trickster element to it. I think it's the trickster element to it because, and I think the trickster bit is really the right description of this stuff, because it's never, it's never direct. It's never direct, kind of like, I'm a representation of consciousness that is fractal and far beyond you, and you can't really understand me, and it doesn't explicitly explain itself.
But that's because, and it's like a synchronicity has the same quality in that it does enough, but never does enough to give the game away.
Yeah,
it never steps over the mark where it just kind of points and then runs away.
It points and runs away and leads you into some weird place. That like genuinely, will just make you go, whoa, what the hell's going on here? Yeah. And like myself, like a lot of people have that experience, like, watching Hellier, and you start to watch Hellier and like weird stuff happens.
Well, like a pandemic.
Don't think we can blame
invoking Pan. We get a pandemic.
Yeah, Pan, it was there, but that's a tough one. But like, you follow that through, and you're gonna go. That is, to me, one of the quintessential kind of like documentaries of this is what it's like being involved in this stuff.
Yeah, and the reason why I really like it is because nothing happens at the end, and I go, that's really what magic is like. There's a huge build-up, and then you realize what I think, what they may have missed at the end of it is that the ritual wasn't for them; it was for Pan. So you don't get to see the end of it.
Possibly.
It's because I often find that there's this momentum happens, and then it seems to fizzle out. But I often then think, well, maybe it's not that, like who does the the Grail serve? It's you're serving God rather, or the gods, whatever, rather than them serving you. So it's like a lot of this stuff could be for someone else's benefit, and you're looking for your benefit, and you're going, I know it's nothing to do with you at all. You're just the conduit here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is. Like the conduit element is an important thing to get our heads around, right? And kind of like when people get involved in magic, they sometimes can get this grand vision, right? Or they start communing with spirits, and the spirits kind of go, well, you're the chosen one.
Always.
Yeah, right. Yeah. If that ever happens, hang up, right, straight away.
It did happen to me. It happened to me during a Reiki thing last year, or whatever it was before. Thing, and I got the whole chosen one, the whole thing laid out in front of me, and I went, haha, I know all about this. No chance.
Forget it. And it's kind of it's kind of understanding that, like, even if you are just a conduit that is going to start someone else's journey, that's okay. That's grand. You've done your bit. Like it's okay to be the one who kind of makes the thing that in 10 years' time somebody else will start a new journey that leads to somewhere else.
Yeah, it's like it's all right to be Trinity or Morpheus rather than Neo, or
whatever it is. Exactly.
Just don't be sci-fi.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I don't want to be taking too much more of your time. So what I would like you to do, your podcast that you've been doing, Spirit Box. Can you talk a wee bit about what it is, like for people who don't know, and also maybe point people in particular episodes, because I know people when they try and describe the podcast, you just go, I'm just listening. Go, well, it's the particular ones that is a good in for people.
Sure.
Or
there's a couple that stand out. So the podcast really for me, it came out of me just putting some of my kind of lectures and thoughts up on YouTube, and people got in touch with me and kind of said, I'd like to talk to you about this thing, and that thing might be kind of like a Western view of a kind of Western American view of kind of demonology, that kind of thing. And eventually I've done a couple of interviews with a couple of interesting people. Not a huge amount. Most of it was my own stuff on gin and fairies.
You had done an interview with Graham Hancock, as far as I know.
Yeah, I did that. Crikey, yeah. I mean, 2016, and so I taught Graham Hancock's wife how to use digital cameras.
Right.
So that was, and he used some of my photographs of Göbekli Tepe in some of his lectures.
Oh, right.
Which is cool. That was a cool one because, like I said, I was really interested in archaeology. I got to meet Graham Hancock, and it's just like, my liege. How may I serve you, sir? You know, that was an incredible experience to me. He's a lovely, lovely guy. And so I pulled that stuff together, and kind of really it was, you know, a lot of people were asking me, why don't you make this into a podcast? You should make a podcast with this. And I'm like, okay, should I do this? And everyone was like, yeah, definitely do it. So I did it. And I had a lot of support from kind of the occult community.
I assume it was part of the Find the Others.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and I had actually one of the standout ones would be kind of Marco Visconti talking about kind of ultra terrestrials and Lamb and the connection there. And a lot of this did have quite a lot of synchronicity. It's like the minute I started thinking about kind of like, crikey, you know, doesn't Lamb look like a grey? You know, somehow Marco and I got into some contact. I can't even remember how it happens, and that came from there, you know, and that was kind of one of the first ones, and the podcast came out, and that's a really good one. In fact, I think that's its episode. I think it's 13, if I remember correctly. That's up for best podcast episode of 2020 for the Witchies, which was cool, really cool to get. And so the podcast really is about me exploring the spirit world by talking to people who know about it, right? So kind of like, as I said, you know, I'm not an experienced magician. I have a very basic practice. Like I am the kind of total noob, you know, neophyte, and I have no I have no airs and graces. Yes, none whatsoever. At all about it, you know. So for me, it really is exploring what is the other.
So you guys, suppose that you're the everyman that allows people into this world. Is that the kind of gist of what?
To a degree, because I know a lot more about jinn and fairies than most people.
Oh yeah, because that's just it. Like I mean, like you can only do that for like possibly 3 episodes. Then you know too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so. And I've done a lot more kind of the actual kind of exploration into these areas, and kind of, you know, done photographic essays on them. So I've got kind of a lot of hands-on experience in that, which I think gave me some cred. But yeah, it's just kind of interviewing people about their experience and kind of the interesting things that they do, and that's part of their practice. What can they bring to the table? So for me, it's kind of it's building up that kind of library of knowledge. Yeah. That people can listen to and take what they want from. But it's really cool. I get to talk to really interesting people. You know, that's an awesome thing. You know, and fry my computer in the process.
Well, that just gives you a choice in that. What's the plans for the future? Is there a book? Is there a documentary? Is there?
I think eventually there'll be 2 books. There'll be a photographic book, and then I'll probably write something about kind of just about the various different adventures in terms of how they changed me, you know, and where it kind of got me to. But in terms of kind of other episodes to mention, Aidan Wachter was very good on the show.
I think there's a guy called Tommy Kelly on it. It was awesome.
Well, there was a dynamic, creative, inspirational,
a tour de force, some might say.
It was you know, broke the internet, etc. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Tommy was on. The bell. Tommy was on, and you were one of the early ones, actually, Tommy, weren't you? You were like
I was on before. You know, you got people who are worth talking to. I think it's probably a way to look at it.
Well, what I'm going to say is, I saw some of the comments actually on YouTube about someone saying like I could just listen to 2 Irish blokes talk for forever.
Oh yeah. Someone's like, it's like just sitting in a pub with 2 Irish lads at the other table. Yeah. Great. Yeah, I'll have that.
Yeah, exactly. And Joshua Cutchin was on recently, and we had a great chat about his work at Thieves in the Night, about fairy abductions. You know, and that's the stuff actually, when you start to get into Irish history about fairy abductions, it's mental. Right. Like, there's so much of it, you know, like there's just so much of it, and it's across the world. Like, the same stuff is across the world. So that's really kind of, you know,
do you know David Halpin? Are you aware of him? Circus.
I do know him. We
if I can recommend anyone to you to have on your podcast, that would be the man I would recommend.
Well, I've offered him on a couple of times, and he's gonna have a think about it.
Yeah, he won't come on mine either because his head's wasn't in the right place or something last time I asked him.
Yeah,
so I guess. Yeah.
Fair enough. But no, I think he was kind of saying he's just not really. He's a writer first and foremost. But no, I'd love to get him on, and hopefully if he's having a listen, come on now,
come on.
Let's get on with it now. Come on.
So, have we missed anything that you would like to talk about?
I suppose it's probably worth giving a quick reference to the photographic work.
Oh yeah, of course.
You know,
like if you Google your name, you get the photography.
Yeah.
Like, is there an actual Spirit Box website itself?
There's not. No, there's not. There's just
Is that by design?
Yeah, it's by design for now because I started it like 6-7 months ago. The actual podcast, the YouTube's been going for ages. I just kind of want to see if it works first, and see where I get to with that.
So yeah, the photography you wanted to.
Yeah, photography. So it's that was a real special thing. And I think when you think about creativity and where it takes you and how it can change you and how it can grow you, it made me go to places I probably never would have gone to. But beyond that, it got me into those places because the camera was the key into those spaces. Yeah. I got to spend time with Sufis in Kosovo, like stay with them for a week while they're prepared for kind of their New Year's ritual. The camera got me there. I would have never experienced that. So
is it like, would it been like Tumblr about it, but it's a bit like your magic wand, like your camera is how you weave your magic in a sense.
Well, all of this, all the kind of interesting people that I've got to meet, all the kind of great places that I got to go to, like witnessing an Agori, like a Shavas Adhana, like corpse magic.
Yeah, which not many people see. Yeah. Never mind photograph, like so.
Exactly. Yeah. So I got to witness all of that stuff, and the camera. The camera got me there, but it also made me do it.
Right.
It kind of stopped me being lazy, and it made me get up and go and look for these things. And
the fact, I suppose, that it's your heritage too seems that the drive seems to be, you could almost say, ancestral in that kind of.
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah, it definitely is. Like my great grandfather I mentioned, like he spent loads of time out in the islands of the Western Islands of Ireland, like loads of time.
Right.
Yeah, and like loads of stuff of his stuff's in the National Museums as well, like because he was photographing all this stuff in the 1930s, 1920s, and that didn't exist anymore.
Right.
Which is kind of cool.
Could you turn up at the museum and go, "Can I have all this? It's really mine." My.
I have done actually. We're in the country, the Museum of Country Living in Mayo, and there was a couple of big photographs of my granddad's and my great grandfather's, and my mum was with me, and like basically. Got a bit Karenish.
Right.
It was all like, that's my granddad's photographs there. Yeah. You should label them, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I'm all for her Karen at that point.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's it. I think that if people are looking to explore this territory and
would you say your territory is Jinn fairy more than anything, or is that unfair?
It's one aspect to it because magic is a conduit where you actually communicate with these entities, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. It's like magic is another way of understanding it. It's a direct way of making contact. It's a set of technology that allows you to do that. But I've always wanted to be there. I've always wanted to understand and practice magic from the simple, conjuring and divination ways of working, for something, from straight up from sigils to more complex stuff. It would, even if fairies and Jinn were in kind of like that thing that has my attention completely hooked, it would be something else. There still be magic there. Yeah.
Great stuff. So, I know all of this will be in the show notes anyway, but tell people your websites and your Twitters and all these things, because some people don't, as we know from YouTube, don't look at show notes or know that it's even a thing that exists. And your Patreon and all your things.
Yeah. It's DarraghMasonfield.com. That's all my photographic stuff is there. And if you just Google Spirit Box podcast, you'll find me. on the YouTubes, and it's got all the links there in YouTube, or
And you have a Discord as well. That's a public Discord, isn't it, as well?
It's ish. Yeah, it's kind of more Patreon-ish. But yeah, I've got a Patreon as well. And there's like extra shows and bonus content.
All the bells and whistles.
Yeah, all that stuff.
All right, well, great stuff. We'll definitely do this again at some point. Awesome. I really enjoyed that. So talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Tommy. Pleasure.